Welcome, everybody, to our very first guest episode of Things I Wish I Knew About.
Things I wish I knew about.
If you're not watching this, I'll end the suspense for you because you can't see her.
You should be watching, though, because I think it gets funnier as you watch it.
I think so, too. It's our friend, my real life friend, your internet friend.
Your internet friend.
Those are shiny shoes.
I wore those on purpose. Can you guys see that?
Unlearn16. Joanna Elizabeth Johnson. Welcome.
What are you middle naming me like that for? I'm not in trouble.
To my living room that you've been in
down.
many times.
Guys, we've had to block off Nathan, who is the world's biggest dog, from the recording vicinity.
They know who Nathan is.
And he just runs in and panting and whatever. We're like, we can't really have that on a pod. And to disrupt Nathan, she just lies down chairs. Not
That's
upright.
True. No.
Flat chairs. And he's like defeated. No,
That's
he's lying down.
But he's quiet.
That's it.
So we're going to take it for as long as we can.
All right.
Joe, welcome.
Thank you so much. I really like being first.
It's true.
I enjoy it.
You are first. And it's perfectly timely because we're going to talk about politics today.
I try.
I don't know when this is airing. This week, I think it's going to air because the Canadian federal election is the 23rd.
23rd, 28th?
I think, it might be. I think it might be the 28th, actually. I think you're right.
Stand by. I think it's the 28th. Continue.
So we're going to talk about politics, and I'm not even going to be a dick about it.
Me neither.
You know, I'm going to be as unbiased as possible. The whole purpose for me in having you on to talk about politics today, we can talk about superheroes another time.
It is April 28th for those.
The 28th, yes. Is to just give people who are unaware, on the fence, have been maybe indifferent or apathetic up to this point, just kind of an overview, because it can be daunting if you're not involved in it, if it's like in your peripheries of, it's just that, you know, we have politicians, I don't know who they are, but they run our country, as opposed to taking an active stance in deciding who it's going to be. And I think this year, of all years, is extremely important.
You know, I find it interesting because I was just having this conversation earlier. I don't know how daunting it is. I think people, especially in Canada, what the?
She's been drinking.
TBC coffee.
You know what? Wait, actually, hold on. There could be people, it's hard to believe, that don't know who you are.
What?
So let's just put a pin in that for 1 second. Who are you, Joanna Johnson? Why do you have any knowledge about politics in general? It's true. And what should people know about you really quickly?
I've been a teacher for 23 years. I studied history and political science in a 4-year degree. In my master's degree, I have a teacher's college degree, obviously because I'm a teacher. And so that has been my passion. Those are the subject areas I teach. So whether you wanted to or not, as a teacher, you got to kind of keep on top of things so you can keep teaching those subjects. But this is the area in which I've always been interested in. And then over the course of COVID, I somehow picked up the phone, turned on TikTok, and initially, I was really good at lip syncing.
Oh, man.
Stacey at some point called me and said, "Are you okay? Is everything okay?" They thought, all my friends thought I was slipping off into the abyss.
It was just such a
shift.
Yeah, from who we knew Joanna
That might be another TikTok. That might be another podcast.
We'll scroll way back and you can see for yourself.
Yeah. But, however, and I did something off the cuff about Doug Ford. And it was just, it was actually more humorful than anything else, but just kind of a little bit frustrated and talking about policy surrounding.
This was 2020?
Yeah, it was 2020 and how everything was being handled. And it really just popped off and I went, oh, I don't just have to lip sync on TikTok. There's actually this little caveat. I know now everybody does it, but there's this little sort of section of people that want to know about politics, that want to discuss issues, that want to be a little bit educated and want to have fun while they do it. And I'm like, well, I think I could do that.
You found your community.
That was it.
Yeah.
And the community there is lovely. And I sort of expanded from Unlearn16 on TikTok to Instagram to my podcast, all over the place, and have been able to do some pretty cool things.
And the focus recently has been very much politically fueled, just because of what's
hard not to focus on.
For sure, what's happening in the States, how that affects us here, and whatnot.
Absolutely. And I think that...
So you've got some knowledge base is what
I try. I mean, in no way, shape, or form do I proclaim to be. There's far more intelligent and focused people on the internet and even on TikTok who report on these things. So I'm not claiming, I'm not a breaking news kind of girl. In fact, Aaron Parnas has given me some sort of flashback.
Just blood pressure rising.
Cover my head and
breaking news. I'm like, here we go, Erin.
Too much, Erin. Dial it down. I saw him eating Honey Nut Cheerios this morning. I said, good for you, hon. Just eat those Cheerios.
Take a minute to yourself.
But I'm not that person, right? But I do pick up on, I think for the most part, big moments, big shifts, and maybe some underpinnings. I'm also very much obviously aware, and I focus on social advocacy and human rights and all of those aspects of what goes into political policy.
Yeah.
And I think when I do it the way that I do it, hopefully people understand it a little bit more.
Yeah, like I don't like to pump your tires at all because the world does that for you.
It.
But
But
because you do have a teaching background, I think it's nice that you're able to. Sorry, I have a hair in my mouth. I think it's nice that you're able to break things down into like the simplest definitions, right? Like this is actually what a tariff is. Sure. This is actually what this policy means or whatnot, which can be very helpful because I'm not ignorant to politics, but literally the last time I looked at it would have been what, grade 10? You know what I mean? Like the last time I studied it to have any kind of definitions and how does the parliament work and whatnot, and the difference between federal and provincial and municipal. Like those are things that people forget. And they're so mad at, one level of government. And you're like, actually,
not them.
That's not who you should be mad at,
right.
So it's nice to have someone unbiasedly, like obviously you lean whatever way, but for the most part, if you're giving us a definition, you're giving us a definition.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be sprinkled with some humor and, hey, you're an idiot. Not you, the people you're talking to, but
sometimes I'm an idiot.
Who you're speaking about.
Yeah.
So that's what we're kind of hoping to do today.
And I think that that's the way to take a lot of my material is like, I like to think of it as the starting point for the most part. So you can go into nuances of tariffs and how we tariff people. And some of it is monetary based. Some of it is trade based. Some of it is borrowing stuff. Like there's so much nuance in politics.
For sure.
Where I don't want to boil it down to axe the tax, but I also don't want to be so deep in economic policy and foreign trade agreements that nobody, unless you've literally taken your master's degree in economic policy, could possibly understand it.
Yeah, for what?
Like even some of the stuff I was reading through as we go through some of their policies, I'm just like, guys, you're saying it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You're the way you're saying it, and part of it is you're creating a complexity there so that people think you're smart.
For sure.
Or people think it's, or you're trying to distract from something else, which I also call bullshit.
For sure.
Oh, am I allowed to swear?
Are you fucking kidding?
Oh, okay.
Whose podcast is this?
This is a different.
There's a little E beside my episodes, don't you worry.
What does that mean? What does
explicit
E mean? Explicit?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
Have
know
you never bought an album with an E on it?
Amanda Marshall kind of girl.
You and me both, but I like a little Dr. Dre.
Dr. Dre says.
I swear.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so let's get into Canada because that's kind of what we
and so when you were talking about that, you were just when we put a pin in it, you were saying that a lot of people don't know or understand. I don't know so much if it's don't know, don't understand, or at this point feel so disempowered and disengaged.
For sure, yeah.
And marginalized from a system where they don't really know if they put somebody in, if it's going to make a hell of a lot of difference.
Yeah, that's the apathy of it, right?
I think, I honestly think there's a lot of very intelligent people. You're going to talk about the 90 million who didn't vote in the United States. They're not idiots. It's not that they don't understand politics. They just don't see the point anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's inspiring them. And if we're not inspired, whether we should have to be or not, in my opinion, that's the job of people who are leading. Leaders should inspire. Mm-hmm. And if you're not inspiring, and then we're left with your economic theory, nobody cares. Nobody cares. So even reading through some of this, I'm like, we gotta do it. My desire is a fundamental transformation with how we debate, how we run elections, how political pundits have to engage and have to give speeches and interact.
What's a pundit?
Pundit, like a person who's running or a person who is then informing on politics and running on politics. I just think that's rude. I just think that that if we don't do that, that you'll just see, like we just had an Ontario election, 43% vote.
Honestly.
Right? And that was after we saw the disaster of Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And it's as though people just don't think it matters.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
That people have to understand how it matters. Problem is, I really do think we have a crisis sometimes of inspirational leadership. Yeah. I'm waiting for the You know the Michael Douglas at the end of The American President? Remember that movie? He says,
You're looking for Jack
I
Layton
am
circa early
you know,
2000s?
my name is so and so, and I am the president of the United. I'm looking for Harrison Ford to say, "Get off my plane." I'm
Hey,
looking.
do you know, one
something.
second, do you know that my brother-in-law, Mike, yesterday told me that Raiders of the Lost, Temple of Doom was the prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark? It was technically a prequel? Like it's set before Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Why would he? What? Why would that be the case?
I don't know.
And then why would it be released as such? And why was it so bad?
I love Temple of Doom.
Stop it!
Anything goes. Oh, with Data? Anyway, sorry guys.
It's the worst.
That's my favorite. I no, Last Crusade is my favorite.
But we agree.
By only the Penitent Man will pass. By far my favorite. I love Indiana Jones. We'll do a
So do
whole
I.
podcast
So
on
do I.
that.
Wasn't too impressed with Crystal Skulls, but whatever.
No,
Peace
that
be.
doesn't. That's not even.
You have to
That's
count
not,
it.
I don't.
You have to.
I won't. Canadian politics. So
All
let's start
I brought a computer, guys.
base for people here. Can you
No,
briefly
we're gonna do
sum
base.
up the difference between federal? Let's fuck municipal. Let's do federal and provincial.
I don't want to fuck anybody.
Federal. The difference between.
You know, it's funny. The municipal government, their jurisdiction and what they're in charge of isn't even in our constitution. So,
Yeah.
So our constitutional division of powers.
Do we have a constitution?
Of course, yeah. Well,
It's not like a charter.
No, well, it's a Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, yes.
Yeah,
but
okay.
prior to that, in 1687, we developed our, we still have, we kind of stole the British Constitution, but we still have a fundamental power structure that exists and that was written down in order to delineate powers that existed. So prior to 1982, when we came up with an authentic Canadian Constitution, Charter of Rights and Freedoms,
82?
1982.
Oh my god.
Prior to that, we were following the
British
one,
right?
right?
Okay.
And to be honest, there's not much difference.
Right.
Still, in
So
today's
municipal wasn't even a part of
day.
it.
Municipal's not even mentioned, so it doesn't even exist
Yeah.
in that sort of delineation. So you have federal government, you have provincial government. Provincial government is the government that decides to download or upload services to municipal governments, give them the power of taxation and the power to handle and organize certain things. So provincial governments don't do police, right? That's municipal governments.
Really?
That's city governments.
Oh yeah, we have Toronto, right?
Provincial police. Like,
Yes, the OPP. Okay.
But city governments are city. Well, because it's too big.
and they're
to
highways. They're
administer.
just like rural outside
Right.
city structures. Okay.
So you have federal government in charge of all of Canada, and you have provincial governments in charge of obviously each individual province. Now, the difference between Canada and the United States, our provincial governments have less individualized control over what goes on in the province compared to states have control over what goes on the state.
Right.
I'll give you an example. Criminal law is consistent across Canada. So if you commit a crime in Canada,
the criminal code of Canada,
it
right.
applies to you no matter what province you're in, and the punishments and the consequence is the same across the board. Whereas in the United States, you go to California, there's no death
Right.
penalty. You go to
Right.
Texas, there is. I would like more nationalization, personally, and a lot of people are going to hate me for this because I think.
What do you mean by that? Across the board? Equality? Okay.
Yeah. So, for example, the two things that are provincial in provincial jurisdictions are healthcare and education. I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I have a problem that the standards are different in each province. I have a problem that education and who gets to decide on curriculum and mandate curriculum is very fluid depending on which government official is in power. Like what the Alberta system has done to education in Alberta, especially surrounding Indigenous issues, is disgusting. They think that the kids shouldn't have to focus on such horrible things, that we should
Right.
just focus on the
Sweep it
positives.
under the rug. It never happened.
Things like that. We have universal health care, so we say to provinces you have to have universal health care, but then basically they're the jurisdictional operations
Like we have OHIP, which is
of
Ontario.
putting it into place, and so for example,
Ford decides to
well, yeah, so we
choppy.
we have bodily autonomy in Canada that has been decided by the Supreme Court, but all the administration, let's say, of a woman's right to choose and a woman's right for access for abortion health care, that depends on the province.
It's not legislated.
No, it can't
It's
be.
not.
You say it's legal.
Sure, but
then-
it's also
then
up
if
to
you're in
the
province.
totally.
You're like, oh,
Yeah.
we got one clinic.
Uh-huh.
They see 3 people a
Uh-huh.
day. Good luck to you.
Somebody sent me a stat actually of the access within Canada to different
Access is a
clinics,
huge
and
deal.
huge deal, and not even in places like Nunavut. Like East Coast has like 3 available clinics,
Just when
which
they
is
don't want it to be.
crazy to me. crazy.
But
Okay.
even somewhere like Ontario, like my mom worked at St. Mike's Hospital. If you have a Catholic hospital, which, don't get me started,
Honestly.
that gets public funding, they won't perform.
Really,
They won't perform. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, you're a major urban hospital
honestly.
in a country that has said this is a constitutional right, and you're going to say, no, go down the street? They also don't deal with transgendered surgeries and operations.
This is a whole other episode. Okay, hold on.
Well, that's why I think it should be more federal.
Okay, so federal takes care of income taxes. Perfect.
So yeah,
So this is what we're doing right now is a federal election. This is our prime minister. So if you're not in Canada and watch, I don't know if you're right into this.
Anyway,
just watch anyway.
Even if you're watching this from a U.S. perspective, I think talking about some of these issues in a significant way matter.
But so we don't elect a president, we elect a party. So there is a leader of each party, but it's broken down differently here where we elect people within our ridings, and then that's within each province, and then eventually elects a party in either a majority or minority government.
You want me to go over that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I'm just giving you a basic overview.
Okay.
So federal takes care of
things like climate, energy, cost of living, defense, foreign policy,
big
government spending,
umbrella,
healthcare, but in a funding way, not in a
basis by basis.
Immigration, infrastructure, and tariffs.
So in terms of all of these kind of things that federal is taking care of, it's mainly like budgetary, right? Like you are allotting certain amount of money to each province, and then it's up to the province to delegate how they are gonna.
Federal government takes income taxes. As they take income tax, they decide which provinces get what in order to equalize those payments. So some provinces bring in a lot of money, like Ontario and Quebec, and obviously Alberta, and some provinces do not. In order to ensure those provinces are going to have basic social services met, we take in that lion's share of money and then redistribute it to ensure that every province is at least minimally taken care of. Now, whether those equalization payments are perfect or not, that's neither.
So what we're doing right now in our federal election is kind of deciding which parties, which we're going to go through, what is important to each party. Topics are key on their docket, really, where they want to allot that money, budgets, cuts, whatever, what have you.
Yeah. And I think when I go over this kind of thing, like I went over and I sort of combed through all of the political parties' ideas, sometimes I will make sort of off-the-cuff statements. Sometimes I won't, and I'll just give it to you. I think that the interesting part to understand is I am not going to spend a lot of time saying, well, they're giving 1.5 billion. They're giving 1.8 billion. See, I think that's just confusion of the actual issue. What are their priorities?
There's so much nuance in that too.
It's ridiculous.
It is.
I think there's fundamentally two kinds of people or ideals that get into politics. I think there's individuals who believe that a strong economy will beget a just, happy society. And then I believe there's individuals who believe a just society will eventually beget a healthy, fair, and sustainable economy.
Yeah.
And that division...
It's polarizing.
That division is significant.
Honestly.
And if we were just being honest about that division, we can have some real cool debates about that. But instead of doing that, what ends up happening is one side calls the other side communist, the other side calls the other side fascist, and then we kind of play into that hand by how we advertise, and then you have the liberals kind of teetering in the middle, depending on the day and how the wind blows.
So right now, sorry, let me just nutshell this. So for a very long time, I don't know how many years, 8, 10, Justin Trudeau was our prime minister. Justin Trudeau of the Liberal Party was our prime minister. This past January, so throughout COVID was a rocky time for everybody. It was a real rocky time. But as the economy and everything progressed post-COVID, Justin Trudeau, as a Liberal, his popularity as a person, as the head of that party, kind of started to plummet based on a million different factors. It started to plummet. He and his Liberal Party, because there's his opposing party, the biggest competition really is the Conservatives. I don't even know, do they go by progressive conservative anymore? Right? So the Conservative Party would be...
Nothing progressive.
No, they're not. They're regressive conservative. Anyway, we're being unbiased.
I never promised that.
That's true. The Conservative Party is led by Pierre Poilievre. So he, while Justin Trudeau was kind of on a decline, was just ramping up with slogan after slogan.
Just the axe the tax. Did he have another
No,
slogan?
it was like a trifecta. It was axe the tax, something the something, something the something.
All right.
Anyway, so as he started to ramp up, it was kind of this weird limbo of who do we vote? If you were not a conservative and the Liberals had no shot of winning, what are we going to do? You know, because everybody was very anti-Trudeau at that time. Within the party, they decided he was going to step down. Our prime minister stepped down in January. And a lot of people didn't understand this, which is why there's a lot of misinformation. You could vote for the leader of that party. So right now we have Mark Carney as our prime minister. And there's all this vitriol about like, they just placed him there. We didn't decide. No. I voted for Mark. I registered as a Liberal. It doesn't matter if I'm a Liberal or not. I registered as a Liberal to place my vote to decide who would be the next leader, interim leader of that party until we have a federal election. So that is who our prime minister is right now. It is still the Liberal Party in power because that doesn't change just because the leader stepped down. It's the same thing with Kim Campbell. It's the same thing with Danielle Smith, to be honest. She's not the prime minister.
The only caveat there, and I think a lot of people didn't love the fact that he wasn't a sitting MP.
For sure.
So in a lot of ways, you're right. You elected, and anybody who belonged to the Liberal Party could vote in that leadership convention.
I think
and
people did not know that at all.
No, everybody knows that. The only thing is you only can belong to one party. So if you're a Conservative Party member, you don't get to vote for leadership in that.
I mean, for sure.
And what the flip side, they would argue, was that a person like Kim Campbell, at the very least, she won her elected seat. So at least she was in the caveat of already being elected.
Yeah.
Again, still not how our Constitution works, still not how our rise to power works. We can argue the functionality and the democratic nature of that separately, but you cannot claim that somehow somebody juked the system. It's
Not
exactly
at all.
the way the system was built.
And to be fair, it wasn't like Mark Carney was unfamiliar to Canadians, to politics, to policy, to industry or economy. Like it was a very key player in Canadian economy for a very long time.
Well, and he's an economic superstar.
Oh, God, what a
If you
dreamboat.
look at Carney, he's a bit of a rock star around the world. He led the Bank of Canada. He led the Bank of England.
He has like the Order of Canada.
Everybody in England are pointing to the fact, well, we didn't like him. No.
That one woman didn't like him for
what they
4
didn't
minutes.
like is when they pulled out of the EU, as he told them not to do.
Totally.
Their dollar took a dive and their economy took a hit. He didn't do that.
No.
That was a choice that they made when they pulled out of a strategic economic alliance
100%.
because they didn't like their immigration pattern. So that has nothing to do with him.
Which is, I mean, this is just my personal opinion. If you are conservative and you're all about money, I don't understand why you would be anti a doctor of economics. But anyway, let's go.
By the way, I'm going to stipulate this before we go through here, because I'm real tired of people saying that bias is the same, that being biased and fairly representing both parties is the same thing. For example, if a party does something stupid, if I have a party that is saying the earth is flat and I have a party who believes in science, I do not have to give equal time to both of those ideas. One idea is fundamentally flawed. And what we've stepped into in this world is, no, Joanna, you got to give idiots the same time. No, I don't. That's not bias. Actually, that's the opposite.
Yeah.
If I gave flat earthers time to actually discuss their stupidity, that isn't not having bias. That is actually choosing stupidity.
Yeah.
And I'm not in the business of that.
We're going to create a boundary.
It's ridiculous.
It's
so
stupidity.
dumb. You don't just give equal time on airwave just because you happen to belong to different parties. I will give equal time to decent ideas with actual information to back them up. That's what deserves equal time. Not if somebody says axe the tax one more time. Well, they won't say it anymore anyways. But.
No, that's not working anymore. Okay, let's go.
3 leaders. We got Pierre Poilievre of the Conservatives, we got Jagmeet Singh of the NDP, and we have Mark Carney of the Liberals. Those are our 3 Liberals.
Yeah, we have more parties than that. We have the Green Party. We have the
Bloc Québécois.
the
and the PC. But I think that didn't the PC just talk about PPP? Didn't they just talk about joining forces with the Conservatives?
Yeah, that's so we're not going to touch on those just because whatever the reason is, they're not in the running. Realistically, they're not in the running.
The Bloc Québécois will take a lot of votes.
For sure.
And they're going to take a lot of votes, but they don't run outside of Quebec.
No.
So when people say they're a national party, it's not, first of all, the Bloc Québécois is actually very, very smart. I think they have a lot of good ideas, and their leader I find interesting. Mm-hmm. However, if you're not gonna do anything outside of your province, I'm not considering you a national party. No. I am sorry. I'm just not. You're not interested in the national ideas. You're interested in a national voice for Quebec. I have a problem with that.
Represent Quebec, but you're never gonna run the country.
Have a good time, but I'm not counting you in the group.
To get to get a seat in the House of Commons, you need 4% of the vote, I think is what it is, right? And like Green Party has like one seat, which is a big deal when it happened. But
I'll sum up the Green Party.
I like Elizabeth May.
I like Elizabeth
I like her a lot.
I like Mike in Ontario. I'll sum them up. Obviously, very much focused on environmental policy, but probably their number 2 and very closely related is connecting cities with the North. Every single part of their policy is about we need
what do you mean by the North?
To the North. Like, they think all of it has been sort of pushed into the way. And if we were to connect all of that with housing, with infrastructure, with transportation, we would be a stronger country. And then all of their focus and their money, that's where their programs are going.
That's how I feel about immigration. Like, bringing people to the North. I know,
there's nobody up there voting for that.
I know.
So what you're asking for people, I'm not saying it's not smart, but what you're asking for people in Ontario is to take a hit in healthcare, quite literally, because we need to build to go up to the North. Now, does up to the North make sense for our future? Absolutely.
100% it does.
It's too far in the North for us to have.
All right, so we're going to focus on the big 3.
Big 3. So the first thing we can talk about is climate change and energy. So basically, we're going to talk about carbon pricing. Now,
what is carbon pricing?
I know you're going to ask me that.
Yeah, what is carbon pricing?
I have spoken to 3, not 1, 3 different leaders. Political leaders, I've sat them down, I've said, explain carbon pricing, and I get a lot of hums and haws and back and forths. Why? Because carbon pricing is a very hard thing to narrow down. I will sum it up the best I can. It is a tax on industry and on the individual, yes, both, well, not anymore, a tax on the individual about how much carbon we emit, and we just get taxed on the basis of, in the company sense, how big your company is, in a personal sense, sort of an estimated gauge of how much you're consuming. So when you go to the gas station, for example, there is a carbon tax on gasoline.
Because of the emissions we're creating.
Yes, and it's supposed to be redirected and funneled back into the environment. My problem with carbon pricing is, does it actually, and this is the big argument, does it actually do what we say it's going to do? So when I tax a corporation or an individual, by the way, they gave back a lot of rebates to the individual. When I tax corporations X amount, am I really taxing them? Is that money going to be servicing and utilized in order to save the environment? I don't think it's been in play long enough for us to tell.
It's fairly recent.
Yeah.
The carbon tax. And now it's gone.
No, carbon tax has been around even since...
Harper, no?
Even since Harper. So it's not that long ago. But the rebate is since Trudeau. The rebate, hilariously enough, Trudeau getting blamed for the carbon tax, the rebate actually came out of his office. Now, as of recently, Liberals in power have cut all the carbon tax on individual basis, not on companies.
Right.
So that's
so when we go to the gas pump, it's cheaper. It's substantially cheaper.
Yeah,
it's like 30 cents cheaper. I got gas yesterday. I was like, what is this? Delightful.
So both the Liberals and the NDP both agree that they're going to eliminate consumer carbon pricing. So that tax no longer exists. The Conservatives also agree with that. The difference is Conservatives want to take it off of everybody. They don't want
companies as well.
No,
industry as well.
They want to include boost incentives for businesses so that they will want to reduce emissions because they'll get X tax cut or because they'll get this kind of bonus or this kind of whatever. Conservatives want to cut taxes left, right, and center. Now, there is a caveat I don't understand 100%. However, in order to trade with the EU, you need to belong and you need to prove a certain level of carbon that you're agreeing to.
It was by like 2032, right? Or something?
So we need to be in that zone in order to trade with the EU. So by the Conservatives dropping this mandate and saying we're not going to do it, and right now with the insanity with the United States, who are we going to trade with, guys?
Yeah.
who are we going to trade with? And that's what Mark Carney's raised. Mark Carney has raised when Pierre Poilievre's going over everywhere and saying, axe the tax. He's saying, whoa, 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 but what about our international
We got a bigger
agreements?
picture. We got to think about
right.
bigger. I don't know any of this, which I can't believe that you don't, but Carney has had many conversations with the States, not so many with Donald Trump, but Canada's main kind of focus under Carney and the Liberals right now is to source alternate trading route smartly because there is no option, right? Like we have no other option at this point. So trade is a huge factor. What do you need? We can cut this.
I don't think we should cut it at all. Lou just had to jump over the chair, negotiate herself. Hold on, just so we all know, those are her boots. That's Lou.
What's your opinion on the tax? No, I'm kidding.
I love taxes.
Who doesn't? Actually, bye, babe, love you. You know what's funny? This is, again, not here or there. The two highest countries with the happiest population, where they do those studies where you're like, are you so happy? Is like Finland and Denmark.
Of course.
And they have the highest tax bracket
of course they do.
of all of the countries in the EU because they understand that it just makes you better.
Absolutely.
It makes your life better. Money to take care of your citizens.
Here's a caveat to that. Places like Sweden and Finland and Norway are tiny countries. Canada has a different problem.
100%.
I'm very much in support of a high tax base to have a strong social service network. The reason why it doesn't work here as well as it works there is because we have this incredible, massive amount of geography and space that we have to account for when we're then giving out those services and negotiating those.
Think about roads. Roads in Germany, the Autobahn.
So that's our
never
problem.
have the Autobahn because the pavement would need to be glass in order for you to fly that speed.
Right.
There is no world within Canada could create roads to that level of precision to allow that to happen. It's just massive.
We're too big. So I don't disagree. I don't disagree that they're the happiest places on earth. I really don't. I don't disagree that having a strong social safety net and social underpinnings and a high taxation rate feeds that. I think Canada, though, we have a different issue. We have a different issue that people don't speak to very rationally. They're either in the cut everything or spend everything.
Yeah.
And I personally would love to have a conversation that starts with, we can't directly compare ourselves to Sweden, regardless of our demographic, but our geography alone makes it different. How does it make it different? And how does it make it more expensive? And how does it make it more problematic? And if we even had the same taxation rates, could we then play into this, into the same system? I don't think that's the case. But see, that's a good conversation that nobody's willing to have.
No.
They would rather just axe the tax or spend everything.
Well, everything just gets like boiled down to these stupid little catchphrases, or like even something like this where we're talking about carbon taxes and Carney's like, we need bigger picture. You need to think bigger picture, longer term. What is our plan? As opposed to, I think, and this is my biggest problem, I think, with conservative versus maybe NDP or liberal, whatever. It's a very kind of like singular mindset. Whereas I think NDP and liberal are obviously more socialist. It's more like more than just me, my family.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. More than individually driven. It's just that I think that when we get stuck in, and this is what the political parties have done to Canada, less so to Canada and the United States, because the United States is just binary. But in Canada, we have, in all fairness, 4 left parties. So we have the Liberals, the NDP, and if we're going to include the other 2, we're not going to go through their platforms, the Green Party and the Bloc Québécois. All 4 are left party. They are all splitting the vote of the left side. There is nobody on the right side of this needle that is splitting the vote with conservatives.
Yeah.
And if all those 4 parties align themselves, I don't think the conservatives win ever in Canada.
No.
Because we tend to be more of a progressive country.
For sure.
And we don't mind taxes, and we don't mind. So
at the very least, a minority government.
I don't think they would ever win. If you started
maybe in December they would.
You took away all their block seats?
Yeah.
All right, here's the one issue that people are kind of talking about, but I find interesting, which is an east-west oil pipeline. Now, is this a 4-letter word to some people? Of course. And which province is really having an issue with it? Quebec. Quebec does not want a pipeline running through Quebec. Let me play the person, and I promise you I was going to be honest about where I'm going to stand, because the only party agreeing to this east-west pipeline are the Conservatives.
Yeah.
Well, the Conservatives are saying, well, what do we do? Because right now we just have north-south pipelines. So
the majority of our gas and our oil in
all of
Canada
our crude oil,
is in the West. It's Alberta, basically, is where it all is. But we have a north-south situation.
Well, we send all of our crude oil.
Yeah.
We send it all to the United States for the most part. Find a lot. This shouldn't be going north-south. This should be going east-west as well. We should be refining it, and we should be delivering it across the country.
Yeah.
However, nobody wants a pipeline in their backyard.
Right.
Because it could leak, because it's an environmental disaster, because a lot of the times we take up and we access indigenous land that we have no business accessing. But to be honest, the province that's stopping them from doing this right now is Quebec. Quebec doesn't want any part of it.
Yeah.
Now, should they be changing their tune right about now? Yeah, they should be thinking about it.
They may. Listen, nobody has made Quebec love Canada like Trump.
Listen, and I, as much as I don't like Danielle Smith is the premier of Alberta, as much as I don't agree with a single policy that she actually spews, the conversation about oil and about energy is important.
And premier of Quebec?
And I don't remember.
Yeah, all right.
And the idea of, well, it's funny, for the first time, when Donald Trump has been, running his mouth and tariffing everything that we have to offer, all of a sudden Quebec, for the first time, is sitting at a premier's table.
100%.
Having big conversations.
Yep.
It kind of reminds me of the end of Independence Day, when we find out there's aliens and all of a sudden all the countries like each other. You know what I mean? We used to fight with each other.
Well, look,
we're not going to fight
Japan
anymore.
and Korea right now.
Japan,
South
Korea, and China.
Yeah, right.
You want to talk about people that hate each other? Those three countries right now. They're having brunch as we speak.
Scones and tea.
So I think a big conversation to have, and nobody's really having it, is about this east-west pipeline. Liberals talk about an east-west as well as NDP when they talk about an electricity grid. So rather than Ontario selling electricity to those three states that Ford keeps saying he's going to shut it off, they're talking about, why are we doing that? We should be doing it more across the country.
Valid conversations.
100%. This should be the only conversation we're having.
Totally.
This should be the only conversation we're having in a real way. But in a real way, we have to have a conversation that says, we are not isolationists. And that's what Trump is driving for, how to be an isolationist country. You're going to buy our stuff, we're going to do everything in-house, and nothing you do ever affects us. That's not good. Countries are going to band together and go against that, BRICS and all of these other nations, us and the EU. But number two, it's also just not good for stability and for international relations. For a very long time, globalization is not just been about money. It's been about the realization that we live in a globe, that we need stuff from you need stuff from us. The environment I can't control in a dome over my country, and we need to start working together in order to come to a better possible end. And the more we are interconnected with each other, the less likely I am to fire whatever nuclear weapons I have at the moment.
So in terms of like the electricity grid, let's say
a lot of it goes north-south.
How do the PC feel about, or conservatives feel?
They don't talk about it. They're just about oil.
Okay.
I didn't read anything.
So they have no stance on that?
Well, I'm sure they would support that.
He doesn't, listen, again, I'm not speaking for anyone, but I haven't heard a lot of like concrete policies. It really is like that. I have the concept of a policy, you know?
Well, because everybody's so afraid, and this also makes sense. How in the hell, and this is just true of the international system, how do I build a national policy in which I am the prime minister and I get a majority and I'm running the government? How do I build a policy where I have sovereignty over Canada when I don't have sovereignty over Canada? Where no country, and that's what Donald Trump is technically trying to do. He's trying to rein in all this sovereignty. He's not going to be successful because it's not the way the world works anymore. Because what you have to admit as a leader is there's only so much I can control.
For sure.
When the stock market hits the toilet, that's going to impact us. I need to pivot. When there's a national weather emergency, I have to pivot. When there's a war, I have to pivot. All of these externalities are going to impact how I can govern. And the pretense that because I got a majority of seats, I am not the sole dictator of Canada.
Yeah.
I'm just not. That's not how government worked, and it sure as hell not how it works today.
No.
Right? And that's, in my opinion, with the tariffs and the manufacturing. That's what Trump's trying to acquire again. He will be destroyed. Predominantly, he's going to be destroyed by corporations, not even by his own people.
For sure.
People like Apple and all of these companies who make money internationally will eventually figure out a way to destroy him.
Totally.
And as soon as they get a better deal with another country to make more money, they will have zero allegiance to the United States of America because 100%. They can go live in France just the same.
For sure. They don't exist in a vacuum, and I think he's really overestimating.
People don't get that.
Well,
or they don't want to get that.
Yeah.
The cost of living is a big one. I love it when they talk about cost of living like they can control it. So the Liberals are talking about 1% on the lowest tax bracket. So it's going from 15 to 14%. What are we going
to do with all that money? What are we going to do with it?
The Conservatives are going from 15% to 12.75%. And NDP is going from untaxed income, so we're not even in a taxable bracket. They're saying that untaxed income, anybody making below $16,000 doesn't get taxed, but they're going to raise that to $19,000. Guys, I understand that every dollar matters. I really do. And I don't mean to come off as being elitist or having too much money or anything, but this is not making or breaking a household.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's just not.
What that works out to over a year.
But what's that 1% mean across a country? What are we losing? What revenues are we losing? I'm constantly having issues when it's kind of like Doug Ford giving back the little sticker fee, the $140 that Anna was so impressed with. Guys, that matters barely to anybody.
Let's break that down into like elementary level. So basically what we're saying right now is if across a country, the tax rate that you pay goes down by 1%, would equate to
in the lowest bracket
would equate to millions of dollars going to whatever budget, like defense or healthcare or whatever, right? Yeah. So in the grand scheme, is that worth the tax cut when it's really gonna how much is that gonna make in a difference to a family?
It just won't make
like $150, $200.
A hell of a lot of difference.
Whereas big term across the country, it could.
Here's what's going to make a big difference. And these are the kinds of policies where the NDP really comes shining through, right? Because the NDP is the one that pushed for $10 a day daycare. The NDP has pushed for an extension on EI benefits. The NDP has pushed for on pharmacare, dental care, mental health support. The NDP has done all of those things. So the dental care that we see, the $10 a day daycare from the Liberals, that comes from a push from the NDP party. Full stop. It wouldn't have happened without the NDP party. That's a way bigger savings for the average lower income family
for sure
than 1% off their taxes. Because what the Conservatives are saying about all those things is whoever has them now can keep them.
Yeah.
That's code for nobody else after them is getting them.
Absolutely.
Right.
And this is the thing where it kind of comes down to like the individual basis, the morality. If I am a single woman, myself right now, I have no children, whatever, is that key to me? It's not, right? It's not, that's not going to be a big push for me. Whereas like myself, real life with 2 kids and whatnot, I have, my father-in-law is on disability because of his vision. That is a huge factor in my life, right? So that makes a difference for me. And it really comes down to your individuality, right? Like what you see as important. And how do you get people who, like, you don't have children, let's say, like, is $10 a daycare for you? No, fuck, that's not a thing for you. I think you have like the mindset of we're better, rising tide lifts all boats, we're better when we're all better.
And forget even being altruistic and we're all going to
so altruistic.
Forget about that for a second. Let's just talk about if I want healthcare costs to go down, if I want criminal costs to go down, if I want fewer people on the streets in order to have safer neighborhoods. If I want all of that, be smart then. Understand that $10 a day daycare allows that family to survive. If that family survives,
for sure,
not only does everybody's boat rise, but that family adds to the income tax, all of the good things. But even more important than that, and this is what the left doesn't do well, what happens when they fall? How much does it cost us when they don't have stable housing, when that person has to quit their job to take care of their kids, when that kid can't eat when they go to school? What happens then? And what is the fallout of that? The left does a horrible job, and I've said this for a long time, of connecting those dots and drawing out.
Paint a long-term picture here,
yeah,
you know?
And it needs to be clear. It
Yeah.
needs to be monetary based, because
Yeah.
what the right does is they say, this is the number, this is the number, this is the number.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because they're not doing anything long term. They're doing it instantaneously, so
Yeah.
it makes sense. The left needs a Katie Porter and a whiteboard.
I love Katie Porter. Shit.
We should just tell her she can come up here and have
Honestly,
citizenship.
you just be Katie Porter. I wish I liked math.
Well, that's what, and all she does.
Reclaiming
all
my
she
time.
should does
Reclaiming
is-
my time. Reclaiming my time.
She should just write down, you know, you have a family of 4, $10 a day daycare. You give them a 1% tax cut, or you take away this daycare.
Mhm.
What is the economic fallout of that cost? That is brilliant to me, but nobody's doing it in this.
Well, that's exactly, that's the problem with all of these, which is kind of why I don't know if we're being concise in this, but really, like, what we want to touch on is think bigger than these slogans. Don't just see a stupid commercial. We have to, though, Joe. We have to.
That's what they should be forced to do.
But we do.
And the fact that we're not forcing our elected officials to do exactly what you and I are doing in an interesting and relatively basic way.
Yeah.
Because, and this is predominantly in our media, because we're not forcing them to do that, right? They're getting away with memes, and watch the entire democratic system slide.
I know.
This has been happening forever. I've been very deep in have you ever seen Newsroom?
No.
Watch it.
Somebody was just talking about it.
It's an incredible show. And the whole idea is that,
is it a comedy?
no, it's about it's right around the time of the Tea Party in the United States. So just as Obama's entering office, and what's going on with what's going on with the Tea Party and the political system, and how the news media has really at that point drastically sold out to be an entertainment resource,
right?
Which they all are,
for sure,
right? I hate legacy media. By the way, every stupid podcaster, myself included, is also on that, because they're all playing to whoever their advertisers are. As we allow money to direct the news in any way, shape, or form, we have a flaw in our democracy. We have a thorn in the lion's foot. This is the underpinning. Because if I can't sit on stage and keep drilling, let's say, Mark Carney until he gives me a freaking answer, because I'm too afraid that my liberal people are going to hate the way I do it, or the same for the conservatives, what the hell are we doing? And then all we get at that point is we get right-wing people slamming the left and left-wing people slamming the right. Again, this isn't fair, this isn't just, this is horrifically biased, and it's still not focused on what it should be focused on, which is getting a real answer from politicians, nailing them down to something concrete, and then watching to see if they follow through and holding them accountable. And nobody's doing that.
No, there's no accountability, no.
Now, there is one cool difference that I saw within, I don't say that very often when I talk about politics. When it comes to buying homes, the Liberals want to eliminate GST on all homes under $1 million for first-time home buyers. I like it. Now, here's where the conservatives...
It's so hard to get into the market, too, right? As a first-time home, it is near impossible.
Here's what the conservatives want to do, and it's a subtle difference, but this is why this is the importance. Conservatives want to eliminate GST from all new homes sold for under $1.3 million. Do you understand the difference? Besides the 1 and 1.3?
For all new homes?
All new, if you buy a new home?
Anybody?
That's right. There's the difference.
Yeah.
So liberals say if you're a first-time home buyer, we're going to give you a pass on the GST. Right. That makes sense. And if you're an individual, conservatives say no matter who does it, as long as it's a new build. No. So what they're allowing for...
Rich get richer.
Massive corporations
Rich get richer.
Buy an entire area
100%.
And then sell them out the way they see fit. 100%. That subtle difference makes the world of difference when it comes to average people being
to an individual. Absolutely.
The NDP doesn't even talk about buying a house. You can't afford it. Well, what the NDP does is they want to eliminate GST, though, on essentials. No GST on energy, internet, phone, which I think is interesting. They also want to double the disability benefit.
Great. They live on nothing through no fault of their own.
Oh, they also want to ban U.S.-style private health care clinics.
Great.
All right, defense. Listen, I'm not going to spend too much time on defense because it gives me a headache.
Honestly.
There's this magic number. We are supposed to, as a member of NATO, spend 2% of our GDP on defense. Canada has not done that. Everybody complains about it. The United States and Trump really loves to complain about it by saying they're defending us. No, they haven't. The only time Article 5 of NATO...
They're subsidizing us, Joanne.
Article 5 of NATO is when one NATO member is attacked, everybody defends. That has only ever been used once after 9/11. We all went to the defense of who?
The America.
The United States of America. It's the only time it's ever been used. Liberals are saying they're going to increase to 2% by 2030. Conservatives say they're going to increase to 2% pretty much right away. The NDP say 2% by 2032. Now, conservative, this is interesting. The Liberals say they're going to renew Canada's contract with the U.S.
Did they say that?
Now, this might be older. I mean, it's the relatively new information. It might have adjusted lately for U.S.-built F-35 fighter jets. The NDP say they're canceling that contract altogether with the United States, and they're also canceling our P-8 Poseidon aircraft. I want to know what a Poseidon aircraft is, because I want to be a part of it.
Does it go in the water?
Sounds cool.
I heard something completely different, that Carney was...
he might have pivoted.
He was
very
selling...
recently.
It was like 3 billion bonds, 3 billion
Oh, that's in a different section.
U.S. bonds to fund a defense contract here where we would be building...
And that might be brand new.
Our
because
own fighter jets.
This I took off of, like...
It was going to create like 6,000 jobs, and over by the end, like, it was very bright. And that's the thing, right? He's an economist.
I like that.
And he's strategic about it.
Selling
because
those
it, like,
bonds makes sense.
sold our bonds, our
He
own
hasn't
thing.
sold them yet, has he?
No, I don't think so.
I think he's probably going to wait for the election.
Yeah.
He's going to wait until there's an actual, again, more significant mandate for his leadership from the Canadian people.
For sure.
Which, by the way, it looks like he's going to get.
But that was the plan. That was what I heard. And I was like, ooh, that's sneaky, tricky, good.
That is good.
Was good.
I think it's also good. But the problem is right now, when you sell those bonds, you're not getting top dollar.
Well, I mean, it is what it... Are we ever going to get it again?
Well,
it's like, when do you sell Bitcoin?
He should have sold it.
Yes.
Right?
A month and a half ago.
ago.
It's the moment he got into power, that day.
Foreign policy. You want to see the saddest foreign policy? Like, it's nothing, guys. Foreign policy, I don't even want to talk about it. It's next to nothing.
Skip
you
it.
have the Liberals saying...
People aren't voting on our prime minister based on foreign policy.
Well, they're going to impose sanctions on Russia to get a ceasefire.
Oh,
Conservatives are saying they're going to slash... This is interesting. This is actually the only interesting point. Conservatives say they're going to slash foreign aid and divert money to the Canadian military. Who does that sound like?
Trump.
Hi, Trump. If you slash money, let's be real clear, to foreign aid projects, you better put that in Canadian military, because you're going to friggin' need it.
Totally.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that's what nobody who loves Trump and loves all the cut to U.S. aid, nobody understands that the more of that aid you cut, that is soft power. The more aid you cut, you lose your leadership and you lose your control, and things erupt and degenerate into war very, very quickly.
I think all these people that are like, Canada needs to fix things at home before we keep spending money over, like, you're completely missing.
We don't live in a bubble.
The point. Like, we're not sending money to these different regions out of the goodness of our heart. This is not altruistic to be like, you know what?
Not a dollar.
We want to help you out.
Yeah.
It is so much more layered than that. Like, you're completely missing the point.
Yeah, we give aid to, just so you guys know, just understand a tiny little facet. We give billions of dollars in aid to, let's say, some countries in Africa, and then we give it what's called tide aid. So we're going to give you $350 million to buy food, but you gotta buy Canadian wheat. It is a way to subsidize our own market and at the same time help people eat who need food. But don't think for a minute we're like, oh, you can go spend your money in China and get wheat from there. That's not how we're playing.
It is not charity.
Never
Ever.
charity.
Never.
But government spending, everybody wants to not spend government spending. But
I saw a girl on TikTok who created
public spending.
She created an Excel spreadsheet because she loves math about how much, because people are like, oh my God, the Liberals are spending so much money and about how much over the last year parties have actually spent in things like travel and canvassing and And Polyev has been campaigning for a year. A solid, well before this election was called.
It's illegal.
This whole time, Joanna. Yeah. And it actually worked out that they are spending far more than the Liberals are. But it's because the Liberals are in the spotlight that we see where all of this stuff is.
Well, it's also, and I'm
going to find that spreadsheet.
You know how much I hate to support the Conservative Party, but you also have to understand that any party coming up against an incumbent has to spend way more money because the Liberals have free coverage.
For sure.
So no matter who's in power, you know, the media is drawn to that. Everything else, you have to create it. Now, the difference with today's day and age, and nobody seems to be talking about it, is nobody's watching the mainstream media anyways.
No.
So when you're watching TikTok and you're reading Twitter and you're on Instagram or you're watching podcasts, All of this stuff isn't asking and demanding legacy media to show up and actually spend money. So what ends up happening is you get these little tiny echo chambers just then spewing whatever information Pierre wants to spew, or this Pierce. Like, there's a person on Twitter, I'm not going to name his name because to hell with
It's called X.
Whatever. It's called Musk. How do you like your Tesla now? Tesla. He just posted very proudly that he's been offered to come follow around Pierre Poilievre and report on all this stuff doing, and they'll pay for his travel and give him a food allowance. Dude, you just got bought.
Yeah.
You're the cheapest mouthpiece with a little bit of a voice on Twitter, and that's what happens when we don't have an effective fourth estate. You have little teeny guys with
What's
Twitter
a fourth
accounts.
estate?
Fourth estate is the media. So the fourth estate goes back to, you remember that show, The Fourth Estate? It was
The fifth estate.
The fifth estate?
Yeah. Remember?
The fourth.
So what the political parties in Canada do is they pay for media to go with them. Most parties have someone that they will, and they're not part of that party, but they will pay media. So if something happens, media's there to cover it. And it's like, oh, we have this person here, we can get our message out quicker. But you're saying this is somebody from like,
oh yeah,
like just some other guy.
See, the fourth estate, or the fifth estate,
It's supposed to be
the fifth estate was a show.
Unbiased.
The fourth estate comes from the French Revolution. So during the French Revolution, there were 4 distinct categories under King Louis right before they offed his head, right? So you have the clergy, you have, what are the else? Here we go. First, second, and third. So you have the clergy, you have the nobility, so the, you know, whatever. You have the people, who, by the way, was 75%, and then you have the press. And those 4 different divisions initially...
In the time of King Louis, they had the press as well?
In the time of the vote.
Oh.
75...
So got 1 vote?
Clergy got 1 vote. Nobility got 1 vote. That's like maybe 15% of the population. Who the people
got 1 vote.
That's what they were pissed about, and that's what they had the tennis court oath about, and that's what King Louis ended up losing his head about. But there was a fourth estate, and this fourth estate was the press. And the press has to be, I almost believe, I truly believe, we're going to talk about the CBC in a second, I truly believe that there should be a fully funded media that is there. Their primary objective every single goddamn day is to criticize, is to find flaw, is to find discrepancy in the government of the day and the government's talking about the government of the day. That's their sole job. And I don't want them reliant on whether or not the government's going to give them funding because it's in our damn constitution. I don't want them reliant on advertisers because they're going to skew their political opinion, right? We also are going to have to take some personal responsibility because every time people turn on the news and they see something real and interesting and whatever, we flip to it to see that Casey Anthony's on TikTok.
Yeah.
That's our fault.
For sure.
We got to take control of that. But I do believe that we've really lost this powerful fourth estate and it hasn't been rectified by individuals with their phone on their podcast doing, even Aaron Parnas, like he's doing a great job. He's not the fourth estate.
Yeah, no, there isn't one unbiased kind of overarching, because you can do whatever you want. You can skew it to whatever you want and decide, like we are right now. Like I'm trying to be unbiased, but I am very left-leaning.
100%.
Like, that is who I am. That is, you know. So
but I think it's hysterical that people like to profess that they aren't biased.
For sure. And
anybody that stands up there and says they're objective.
Oh no, that's bullshit. Bullshit. But also, I mean, I'm not going to pat myself in the back, but I am very left-leaning. However, if I see an article that is unseemly, or I see anything that I'm like, I will find the opposing fucking argument. I will look for the opposing argument and be like, is this accurate? Like, I have family members that will just share anything and everything, and it takes a 2-second Google to be like, that's not right, man.
Yeah.
That is inaccurate. But I think the media and the political parties are playing on this ignorance of a large portion of the population, an older portion of the population that doesn't understand all of the technology of like what's out there.
Access it.
For sure.
My mom hears stories and said, Joanna, did you hear this? I said, Mom, and I try to encourage her to go figure out other things, but she's not necessarily as adept in order to do that.
Yeah.
And I think A, they play on that, but B, then that's part of our fault.
But that's why you
democracy isn't granted. You have to access it. You have to fight for it. You have to demand it. 90 million people stayed home. Donald Trump got elected.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Totally.
That's not on Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He played the odds that 90 million people are going to stay at home.
For sure.
Doug Ford played the odds that 57% of Ontario couldn't be bothered to come out when it was cold.
He called the first election in the
Smart
winter
man.
since
He
the
knew.
1800s.
He's like getting an election right now.
He
Right
called
now.
it a year and a half early on
course he
purpose.
did.
If you think that he didn't, you're fucking crazy.
course
In
he
the winter, a year and a half early, because he knew that that's what would get him reelected.
It's absolutely, yeah, well, but that's a smart move.
Yeah.
Now we can talk about election reform and whether or not politicians should be able to call elections, or we should have very, very specific dates. The problem in Canada is we have a different form of government. We'd have to change all of it. You can't just say we have a final date and this is the date, because if there's a vote of non-confidence, there has to be room for that.
It can't. It's a living entity.
There has to be
you
room.
can't.
We can have a final date.
Sure.
Right? We can have an outward date, but you can't. Anyways. So the Liberals talk about funding the CBC. The Conservatives want to defund the whole thing. Of course they do.
Guys, I like the CBC. Check this out.
Of course the Conservatives
Have you
want
seen
to
my mug?
defund the CBC.
It's a CBC mug. The best.
And again,
I like the CBC.
Listen,
I love it's our
support the
NPR. Like, I love that we have a national. I think that the problem is probably funding with the CBC, because it is underfunded.
Well, all the Conservatives will say that they're biased against the Conservatives. My question is, are they biased, or do Conservatives suck more?
Yeah, honestly. Or
those are two different answers.
But you're telling me you couldn't fund the CBC and have a whole separate entity of it that is conservative leaning? Like, you could have your own section.
They're not supposed to be conservative.
I know,
leaning.
but you know what I'm saying.
They're supposed to be truth leaning.
Have a talk show of a guy who is.
They're supposed to be
whatever.
truth leaning. Nobody on the CBC should be talking about flat Earth.
Are they?
And how what? No, but they are in all other places.
Okay, fine.
And there shouldn't be a part about talking about how vaccines cause autism.
Honestly, CBC, give me a show.
It should be the truth.
I'll take a show.
That's what it should be leaning towards. Therein lies the bias.
Yeah.
And if more conservative pundits are pointed out to be idiots, and that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah.
That's not about being
No.
fair.
No.
That is about being objective to the truth.
Yeah.
Not fair to both ideas,
Yeah.
because if some ideas are better than others, those should rise.
Well, just accurate and
Ridiculous.
fact-driven.
It's insane. Go watch Newsroom. Healthcare.
Oh, that's a big one.
Healthcare is just about funding, though, guys. Remember,
But it should be.
individual provinces are the one that administer healthcare.
For
right?
sure.
Liberals are expanding dental care. By the way, that was an NDP idea. $52 million in healthcare funding construction. What does that mean? I have no idea.
52 million across Canada?
That's what it says.
Is that one hospital?
Doesn't sound like a lot. I think it's all in Drake's house. He's not using it anymore. Conservatives, they want to abolish consumption sites, obviously. All of the,
Why?
Here's why, Stacey.
Do you
You
know
want
the
to promote, wait
Oh.
for it, recovery and rehab. How are they going to promote it, do you think? Just a pamphlet?
I'm gonna punch them in the face.
Just a safe injection site, and instead of that, you'll get a pamphlet saying, please, go get help.
Listen to me, listener. I need you to do me a favor and pause that.
More than 12. This is some good crap.
It really
here.
is.
You share it.
I need you to go look up data on consumption sites, safe consumption sites, and how positive they are. Go look up the data about why we have these areas and why they're so necessary. Carry on.
All right. I'm just going to get worse. Here's what they're open to.
This is the Conservatives.
Open to imposing mandatory drug treatment on minors and prisoners.
Pardon me?
That's right. When they are found to be incapable of making decisions for themselves, the Conservative Party is open to imposing mandatory drug treatment on minors and prisoners. My question is with the minors. Is their parent no longer their guardian at that point?
What drugs?
Dude, this is all it says.
Are we giving them a drug to create zombies and we have
This is it.
advertised slavery?
That's what they're looking for.
Oh, that is a
What do
slippery
you
slope.
think the prison's gonna look like?
Guys, that's a slippery slope.
Isn't that crazy? I just read that in the little tiny fine print today.
So they're
I'm
going to
like,
make
what?
decisions.
I'm assuming they're
Bodily
superseding
autonomy
parents.
decisions.
Because kid's not 18 years old. You, as a parent, can put them in a treatment facility, can you not?
Sure.
Right. So that already exists. So what they're talking about is usurping parental autonomy over what's good for their family and their kids, and the government instituting it.
Oh, no.
Ruh-roh.
That's a big ruh-roh. Well, that's, you know what? Pierre has I don't know what it actually is, but he has a policy on first-time offenders, right? Like, not repeat offenders, I'm sorry. Not releasing them back out, but maybe that goes hand in hand with that. Like, once you're in there, Oof, that needs some more Googling for Stacey.
Again, conservatives say they're not going to, people who already have dental, childcare, pharmacare will not lose those services. That's all they're promising. So whoever has them already, what he's saying, in the fine print, is he will be canceling it for everybody else. NDP would strengthen all of that. They would strengthen universal health care, expanding pharmacare, dental, mental health. They would ban U.S. companies from buying Canadian healthcare businesses and enforce provinces, this is a big one, guys, to end privatization of healthcare if they are seeking federal funding. So, Doug Ford right now is trying to figure out ways to privatize, to offshoot healthcare so he doesn't have to spend it.
Yep.
If he wants federal dollars for that healthcare, he has to stop doing that. It's a big one.
And that's NDP?
Yeah, of course that's NDP.
Yeah.
Housing, we've kind of gone over housing. Here's my question about housing. Like, we've gone over the first-time home buyers, right? But everybody's talking about how do we build more housing. And I meant to look this up a little bit in more detail, but
Carney's planning,
Brian
right?
Mulroney, so back in the 80s.
He was our prime minister in the 80s.
He is the guy that gave up. Because a lot of people say, well, we don't want the federal government. Because a lot of people are talking about, like the Liberals and NDP are talking about creating federal programs to build affordable housing.
Yeah.
And everybody's calling it communist left, right, and center, right? This isn't new. The federal government used to be in charge of this program of building affordable housing and making sure it's meeting demands and doing it from a governmental perspective. Brian Mulroney is the one that privatized it because they said they're going to do it better.
What party was Mulroney?
I wonder why we're in this situation. And he was a good conservative.
It's true.
I liked Brian Mulroney. Ben Mulroney, not so much. Shut the hell up. You're really annoying me. But Brian Mulroney was the guy that tried to transform our Constitution to include Indigenous people, to include workers' rights, to include an elected Senate. Those are all powerful things. But Brian Mulroney also tried to save money. He's the one that signed the NAFTA in the first place. He's the one that started selling off. It's called the BIP. It's basically if you can buy your way into Canada, you get hopped to the front of the line. Kind of like Trump's doing with his $5 million little stupid card.
The gold card.
It's not a new thing. These things that Trump's doing aren't new. Brian Mulroney tried to sell off these things in order to balance, or tried to balance, the huge tax savings he was then giving the wealthy and corporations, in which it didn't even work because he was in a huge deficit. But one of the things he did is he sold off the responsibility of the federal government actually building housing across Canada.
Housing is a huge...
Nobody talks about that. I'd be the first thing I'd be talking about. A lot of them are talking about selling off federally owned buildings to use for housing, which I find interesting.
All right.
I'll admit when I agree with the conservatives are passing or have this idea of implementing an NIMBY, not in my own backyard policy, on municipalities that block construction because of opposition from local residents. So,
oh wow,
I don't hate it though, because here's what happened.
Listen, behind my house is a field that I love.
Sure you do.
I would love to just never have that developed.
And I bet you this whole line of houses would say the same
thing. Oh yeah,
thing,
for sure. We would rally.
And that's what's blocking things. And that's what blocked, for example, Doug Ford decided in Toronto not to implement fourplexes. Because nobody liked the idea of a fourplex, because that brought in the wrong kind of person.
I lived in a fourplex in Toronto.
This is what I'm saying.
It was beautiful.
This is what I'm saying.
It was a quaint, beautiful, low-rise,
that's part of the problem,
building.
Right? We built ourselves into this ridiculous idea that we are supposed to have these huge homes and sprawling urbanization, and now we're shocked that we don't have enough homes in the right density, in the right population centers, in order to service a population so they can work there.
This is why we got to go north, Elizabeth May.
Well, and it's why we got to stop building homes that are like even my home. I mean, I don't live in a big house, but I have 3 people in that house. I don't ever sit in my living room.
Really? Oh yeah, you always sit in your bed.
We have a front room. We have a living. I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
When my grandmother bought a house and had 4 kids.
It was a wartime home.
You had a basement that was done because your dad renovated it, or your mom could renovate. I don't care who's doing the renovation. Back in the day, it was my grandpa.
100%.
But I mean, your kids shared a bedroom.
I shared a bedroom with my sister.
We don't live in those times anymore.
Growing up in the 80s.
We live in the times, every kid has to have their own bedroom, and we need bigger spaces, and we need a huge backyard, and we need this, and we need that. Bullcrap. No, you don't. The sprawling urbanization that happened post-1950s is the problem.
Yeah.
The way we built houses is the problem. And you want to know why we built these stupid giant houses that were way too much money? Because we invented something called the mortgage. And in the 90s, when we invented the mortgage and people could put their house on credit, it allowed everybody and their brother to go out and buy a house. So everybody could go out and buy a house. And shockingly, all of those house prices went all the way through the roof in inflation because nobody was buying it with real money. My grandma spent $18,000 on her first house.
Totally.
And if you adjust for inflation, an average house in Toronto, compared to everything else, every other inflation-based product, houses in the United States, houses in the GTA should be approximately $350,000.
For sure.
And what are they?
Easily.
Inflation isn't the problem. What we built, how we built it, and how we handed out money so easily to people just to start a market and pretend as though we had real economic growth when what we had was a housing bubble. Therein lies the problem.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the don't pay a cent of it.
So the Liberal Party making a decision to make housing a federal undertaking again.
And the Liberals and the NDPs are both talking
And the
about
NDP is a positive thing because it just, even with this first-time buyer GST thing, it'll allow people to get into this market where they can't.
Their argument's going to be, the opposing argument is going to be, but if private corporations aren't doing it fast enough, even in a market that demands it, what is really going on? Do you understand? Like, we're saying they can't buy them, but can they buy them? Because somehow...
On credit, they can,
yeah,
sure.
We're all buying it. Nobody's getting a house full out. But what my question is this. I don't think there's empty houses sitting anywhere.
No.
So
Well, that's what I mean. What's the difference between now and, like, if we're not
so
building...
That's what they'll say.
Either way.
If the private entities aren't getting the job done, why would the public entities? A lot of the stuff they're talking about here is they're also talking about cutting red tape. Like, I'm sure we'll get to environmental regulations eventually, but they just want to speed up all the approvals.
Yeah.
Right? You know how zoning works.
I do.
If I wanted to put in a pool in my backyard, we're talking about a 3-month zoning rights situation.
Oh, my
I'm not
God.
interested in that. And there is a problem there.
It's a real...
But that's a municipal problem.
And I was just talking to my ex-husband about that because he's a contractor and he was working about, like, this shed was half a foot too large for this space and permits.
We've lost the plot.
Yeah.
We've gotten, it's just like school, right?
Yeah.
I want to take a kid's, well, I mean, my school doesn't work the same way, but like in public school, you can't go anywhere, do anything, or have any fun anymore because everything has been so heavily legislated and mandated and limited, and it's all based in some sort of litigious state that nobody does anything anymore.
Oh, I had a great time. Like we had a unit when I was in grade 2 where we painted the walls of the school. The entire hallway was monsters. And we got to paint these things and whatever. Like, that would never.
No, they don't do it.
That would never now.
There's one situation in one high school where a chemistry teacher made a mistake with an experiment. Okay, fine.
Human error.
But now pretty much all of the chemicals that kids used to do cool experiments with off the table.
Yeah.
We no longer can use them. And again, it's just like, okay, are we really going to pad everybody forever? Like, accidents happen. Like, I mean, if we're going to ban
schools need more funding.
No more driving. It's a different conversation. Immigration, funnily enough, nobody really talks about it either.
No, eh?
And the
if that's a hot button.
The funny part of that, everybody's like, let's not talk about it. Liberals say that they're going to put caps on immigration until they have a capacity to receive more.
Listen, here's the argument with the Liberal that the Conservatives are really harping on. So Carney hired, I can't think of his name right now, a gentleman to be on his team. He didn't hire him. There's a gentleman on his team who in his speeches and whatnot wants to bring 100 million immigrants into Canada over the next 10 years. So everyone is losing their mind. 100 million. But here's the thing. I think when people hear that, they're like, we can't fit 100 million people in Toronto. And it's not Toronto. Like, we're not talking about putting 100 million people into urban centers, right? And newsflash, for all of you that hate immigration, I'm so sorry to tell you, Canada would not function without it. We are not having babies at the rate necessary to continue the infrastructure of this country of this size without immigration.
Well, this is interesting. I'm reading a walrus.
Is that the thing I just said?
Yeah. Wilfrid Laurier envisioned a bigger Canada, more powerful than the United States. And what they want is 100 million. I don't think they want 100 million immigrants. I think they want 100 million population.
Okay.
So our population right now is what?
47.
47?
No, I was saying like 47 people.
So they want it to
There's
push
300 of us.
I like the idea. The problem here is,
we need immigration, Joanna.
of course we need immigration. Here's the problem. As we push for more and more people, we don't necessarily have the infrastructure. If we don't have the infrastructure, how can we have the immigration? So it's a chicken and an egg thing. Do we put in the infrastructure, or do we wait for the immigrants to be allowed in here in order to create the infrastructure? And then I'm going to go you one step further, because it's not just about how many are coming in, it's the dispersal of the population.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Here's the problem.
They can't
Once
go to city
you're in
centers.
Canada, though, and you're a landed immigrant, we do not control your migration. It is against our constitution to physically control where you're allowed to move in our country. There are already easier paths to citizenship if you go into certain populations.
There's northern benefits.
Right.
If you go to the Yukon or the Northwest Territories, it's literally a northern benefit.
Even if you go to Manitoba.
Yeah.
If you go to Manitoba.
Who wants to be in Manitoba?
If you go to Manitoba as opposed to Ontario, like I've had students coming from different parts of the world and their families are immigrating to Canada and they have to drop out of Metro because their family's going to actually immigrate to Manitoba because within 5 years they can become citizens.
Right.
And what they're hoping for is if you just go in there and you have to at least stay there for the 5 years until you're citizen,
right?
You'll put down roots and you'll live there and you'll help grow that.
I think the egg needs to come first. I think the infrastructure needs to be put in place. There needs to be
asking who's going to pay for it?
An urban sprawl, just me, into the north.
Ask her for the check.
Guys, I'm very wealthy.
Right?
That's wrong. Sponsor me. Anybody listening, I'll take your sponsorship.
Infrastructure, they're all talking about transportation networks, mostly about getting access to natural resources. The only people who really care about predominantly the indigenous population, because that's pretty much whose land we're going to be drilling.
I'm going to say NDP.
In order to get there, will be the NDP. Everybody else doesn't really care. This is also interesting. The Conservatives want to repeal Bill C-69. I was waiting for your joke.
Oh.
Which allows... Which allows... This is what C-69 does. It allows federal regulators to consider environmental and social impacts of infrastructure. The Conservatives want to repeal that. To hell with the environment and social concerns. The Conservatives want to repeal any red tape in the way of infrastructure.
Right.
That's what they want. And again, a lot of them are talking about the electricity grid. Right? This electricity grid, which I'm not going to pretend to know so much about how we get electricity and where we... I'm going to say that's another infrastructure issue. What I noticed about the NDP, which I might have, maybe get to at some point, the NDP wants to ensure that every federal project is only using Canadian steel. So that's interesting.
And they
want to restrict, if not altogether eliminate, U.S. contractors coming up to do foreign bids. Now, what that's going to do is everything's going to cost more.
Right.
Right? Now, with the tariffs going on, I don't know. But if everything costs more for those infrastructure products, that puts Canada deeper into debt for building the infrastructure they need in order to make money. It's a bit of a cycle.
Yeah.
Right. And that's always been our problem with the United States. And we're going to talk about tariffs.
Talk to me about tariffs.
No.
What's a tariff, Joanna?
A tariff. A tariff is a tax a foreign government pays. No, that's not what it is.
It's not.
A tariff can be put on by any government on imported goods coming from other countries. Who pays the tariff? The company within the country.
So let's say I have a t-shirt company.
And you want to get t-shirts, let's say, from Bangladesh, and I'd want you using Canadian t-shirts. As the Canadian government, I am going to put a 50% tariff on your t-shirts being imported from Bangladesh because you're not using Canadian manufacturers.
So my $10 t-shirt, as a manufacturer, as somebody who's selling them,
$30.
If I order from Bangladesh, it's going to cost me $20 to get those into Canada. So if I originally charged you $15,
well, it's not going to cost you to get in. The government's going to charge you the tariff.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
I have to pay.
So you're going to pay the government. And then
I'm paying, so that costs me $20 instead of the original $10.
Yes.
Which I am going to pass on to you as the consumer because
100%.
I will not make a profit if it's already more expensive. So the idea is the incentive would be to buy from Canada, but they're more expensive.
But a Canadian t-shirt, just so we're on the same page, is $40.
Yeah, exactly. So you're paying more anyways.
Therein lies the problem.
Bangladesh is not paying the tariff, is the bottom line there.
Absolutely not.
They are not paying the tariff.
And I say Bangladesh because they make really good t-shirts.
Sure. Yeah, we're just picking a country.
But it actually is a country where a lot of t-shirts come from.
We, as the manufacturer, as the consumer, will end up paying more for penguins. Penguins are going to pay.
Tariffs are awful for Canada, and here's the big reason. Again, nobody's talking about the big picture. Canada has never manufactured a lot in Canada. And the reason being is because of our size and because of our population. So, for example, when Ford was making the Model T down south and it was costing $800 because he had, Ford is a Henry Ford assembly line, Model T, first sort of mass distributed car. He's making it in the United States. He's selling it for about $800. Canada at the same time, this is a true story, Canada at the same time tries to make Canada's version of the Model and sell it in Canada. Go ahead, take a guess how much it cost.
$5,000.
$3,000.
So close.
You went real high.
At the time, though. Oh, because Canada really is huge, but it's also raw materials here, right? Like we have lumber and steel and oil.
Well, we could have done all of it. The point of the matter is our market is that much smaller.
It's spread out.
So in order to make any sort of business run, we have 40 million people. The United States has 310 million.
Yeah.
They have a built-in insulated market to help foster and build corporations. At the beginning of the United States, and I'm just going to post this TikTok later today, at the beginning of the United States, they heavily relied on tariffs. Trump likes to talk about it because it was their only tax. Well, that's before they were even paying for education. So that tax was going nowhere except to the military.
What year was that?
1913 and prior.
Right, okay.
Income tax didn't come into play until after the war.
Okay.
First World War. So prior to 1913, they were tariffing everything. Why? Because when the United States was built as a country, when they seceded from and they won their independence from Britain, they actually had to insulate their market with tariffs in order to protect their market against the British Empire market. They were going to make a shoe for $5 a shoe. Don't worry, Britain was going to make it for $2 a shoe because they were bigger and they had more economic prowess. They were going to crush you. So what did? They put a $5 tariff on all shoes, so it was cheaper to buy American shoes than it was British.
Right.
The problem with that tariff policy, yes, it helped grow the Industrial Revolution in the United States and major corporations in the United States, but it also led to the Civil War.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people think the Civil War was about slavery. Yes, that was part of it. But one of the big part was the South got completely screwed by tariffs because they weren't manufacturing anything.
Right.
So when they had to buy equipment, let's say equipment for their farms or anything that they needed, they had to buy it from America. They knew it was 2 times as much as they could get it from England, and even worse, they were selling a lot of their stuff overseas. So when the United States decided to tariff stuff coming in, they couldn't sell cotton. Again, yes, we understand the slavery as the underpinning was problematic and horrific. But again, it was about money and control of that money and the fact the federal government was tariffing everything, but it wasn't benefiting them. Right? So as they grew and became more powerful, and then they started taking off tariffs because they realized, oh, now we can compete on the global market.
Right.
We're a big boy now.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they were in favor of free trade, like global trade.
Yeah.
Right? By the way, it's never been free a day in its life.
Yeah.
The idea about free trade is a complete misnomer. There's always been tariffs of different kinds.
Yeah.
They've just been specifically directed. Right? So as Trump...
Like freely like you can do it, not free like monetary.
Right. Well, like freely, like, listen, we want to make sure that there's some other countries in this world, as the United States is now this big player in the game and condemning everybody else, like Canada, let's say, for having dairy tariffs. They're condemning all these other countries and saying you're just doing horrible things to the United States. No. Do you check in your history? It's the only way you became an actual player.
Yeah.
There are certain industries you need to protect. Now, there are countries like Canada and the rest of the world who realize we're going to have some tariffs on some industries, but try to have open markets so we can start selling our stuff to the United States and we can buy stuff from the United States and England and the EU and and all of these different places. But we have to ensure that our entire internal economy doesn't collapse and we're not making or selling anything. Because if we're not making or selling anything, guess what? We can't buy, I don't know, Taylor Swift albums from the United States anyway. Because we have no money.
What a travesty.
So all of this is a big, huge, very complicated mess.
Yeah.
That we are now having to fight about.
You know what would be great? If we had a doctor of economy to make a decision.
At the end of the day, what a lot of people are saying, well, let's be honest, mostly the Liberals are saying and the NDP, even though Pierre Poilievre has started saying it lately as his numbers have dipped, the idea that we need to diversify our trading partners.
Yes.
We have been relying on the United States, and this is our fault.
That's our
because
bad,
we got
honestly.
comfortable
Yeah.
and we got complacent.
Yeah.
But we've been relying on the United States as a trading partner forever. We thought that there was a very strong alliance. In
Yep.
all fairness, the United States historically has been getting such a better deal. I just mentioned our oil, such a better deal from Canada, getting our natural resources, manufacturing the goods, selling us back to them at a higher rate than we could even possibly make it at. So the United States has been getting a good deal off Canada for a very long time. The United States just wants full control.
Yes.
That's all they want. He wants full control of our natural resources.
So what are the parties' stance on tariffs and U.S.
So
relations?
the Liberals are going to match the tariffs on vehicles imported from the United States that aren't compliant with our free trade agreement. $5 billion into new trade diversification corridors, renegotiate bilateral trade with the United States after the election. I don't love that because I think you're leaving out Mexico, and I think that's a flaw.
Yeah.
I would take every chance I had to sit down with that woman.
For sure.
She is badass. She is smart. She is quick.
Is anybody having Mexico on their roster?
Nobody's even talked about it.
Right.
The Liberals are just talking about a bilateral agreement. See, I wouldn't be doing that.
No.
Not with the United States. I'd say, no, all three of us are going to sit down. Canada also never really made... We kind of got screwed in that deal, right? All the manufacturing went to Mexico. The United States saw the lion's share of the profits... And Canada was used as a resource base.
You're talking about
of how free trade worked.
the Mexico
North
whatever
American Free Trade Agreement.
Oh, you're talking about NAFTA? Or talking about the
NAFTA.
Mexico whatever one. Mecca or
SMA.
whatever.
Yes, whatever the hell it's called. So stupid. So that's what the Liberals are deciding on a $2 billion strategic response fund to protect Canadian industries, probably give money to auto workers who are going out of business right now. Conservatives.
So the Conservatives so Danielle Smith is the Premier of Alberta and is a very right-leaning conservative Premier.
Right.
Who is
trying to make personal deals right
exactly
now
with Donald Trump and America and whatnot. And that is a real red flag for me personally, shadiness of Canada as a whole, because she's thinking provincially and we need to be thinking nationally. We need to be thinking national, but she really has, I think, very different ideas for Alberta, for the States, and those are in conjunction with Pierre Poilievre. Like, those are very...
Well, she's all but said. Well, she has said.
She has said. There's no all but.
He's up on it so we can get this guy elected.
And it'll be better for all of us.
It's kind of funny, but the same thing is happening right now with Gavin Newsom in California. So Gavin Newsom right now is making big overtures. And
I really thought Gavin Newsom was going to be
more than what he is. Don't start me on his interview with Charlie Kirk. But what he has done recently is he started talking about how California wants to trade directly with other countries and doesn't want to put any trade barriers. They don't want you putting on trade barriers coming from California.
That's a Balkan state situation, Joanna.
He's busting at the seams.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Listen, this is how it all starts to fray.
It is how it starts to fray.
That Trump was going to be over in 6 months.
This is how civil war begins.
I didn't mean that Trump was just going to say up and give up. I mean that there'd be such a fundamental revolt at the way he's doing business and the people it's going to impact that he won't be able to function as the leader of that country.
Google what a Baltic state is. Balkan state.
By the way, here's my problem. Not my problem. Here's my issue with Alberta. This is actually not an issue. The federal government since Pierre Trudeau has never dealt with the fact that Alberta has a specific level of power and influence on our entire energy policy, which is the crux of a lot of money that's being made in Canada. Without them, it all kind of falls apart. And Pierre Trudeau decided to piss off all of Alberta.
Oof. This is a long one. We're so chatty.
A lot of Alberta, you can cut it into two.
Oh yeah.
Back in the 70s, when he started the national energy policy, in which he tried to, for the most part, in some ways, nationalize Alberta's oil. So as soon as you did that, you basically pissed off people from Alberta who had a resource, worked the resource,
Yeah.
didn't necessarily didn't want to share the resource. They just wanted a little bit of a say and an acknowledgement into how the resource was going to be distributed, and the fact you've never created that east-west pipeline.
Yeah, for sure.
You've chosen to make them dependent and tied to the United States of America rather than the rest of Canada. We dropped that ball. Do I love oil pipelines? No. Are they a necessary part of our way of life? Yes.
Yeah.
So marginalizing Alberta the way that we have has, and that's mostly coming from Liberals, marginalizing Alberta the way we have has given rise to the bravado and power that Danielle Smith at this moment has embraced.
Was it Justin Trudeau that was talking about the pipeline, and then they kiboshed it because everybody was like, no, we don't want this.
Yes. The argument about a pipeline is always environmental.
No, I get it.
Environmental.
100%. I get it.
But again, we can argue environmental six days and seven, and the secondary problem is we always want to run it right through Indigenous territory.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, we really need a pipeline. No, I don't want it through my backyard. I mean, that's what the whole standoff was in one of the Dakotas.
Yeah.
I don't know more, right? That was, and they won that.
Yeah.
The idea is, where do we put it? Who takes the risk?
Yeah.
And if we were really honest about the goddamn risk, maybe we could have an authentic discussion about who's going to bear that weight, and more importantly, what's the incentive to bear that weight?
Yeah.
And what's the ramification if it goes sideways? Those are the conversations to be had, right?
Yeah. Yes. Nobody wants to have these conversations.
Well, this is the problem.
They want to have a meeting. Just now, a sweet little tagline.
Here's the one thing the NDP wants to do, and this is where I'm at the end, so if you guys are really tired, this is fine for you. The NDP wants to ban Trump and the United States from the G7 summit.
Come on! I mean, all right. Where are they going to have it? He's not allowed in like 63 countries in the world.
Like a little bit of a bug. Hi, sir. Can we check your phone? I want somebody to stop.
You're not welcome.
I want them to check their phone as they're stopping Canadians. Oh, this seems to be some anti-liberal propaganda. No, thank you. We're not having you in.
Governor of Canada?
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Can I have your passwords to Truth Social?
Mr. Singh, I like a little cattiness.
Yeah, so I mean, everybody's talking about retaliatory tariffs, but what they're all going to, for the most part, that's not true. Liberals and NDP are going to use every dollar to support workers being affected by tariffs.
Yeah.
Conservatives say most of it.
Oh my God. And where is the money going to go? You're not going to put it back into education. You're not going to put it back into healthcare. You're not going to put it, where are you going to put this money?
Military. Planes, trains, and automobiles.
Listen, I am down with protecting the Arctic. I am down with protecting the minerals up there. I'm into it.
No, they're talking, even the conservatives are talking about 2 icebreakers. Is that getting the job done?
Yeah, honestly.
I'm just wondering, like, when we say we want money to protect our Arctic and we buy 2 icebreakers for God knows what amount of money, is that getting the job done? Because I don't think it is. I don't know. It's a big area.
It's a really big area.
We have 40 million people.
I think
and we're trying to figure out how to protect an area that is the second largest landmass in the world with 40 million people and the amount of money that 40 million people make. How the hell do we do that?
Yeah. I think we're hoping that it's going to melt real slow. And over the time it takes to melt, we're going to have money.
You start making, and this is the problem, you start making deals with the wrong
that's
people.
why we're selling bonds.
Right? Oh, we are selling bonds. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there we go. The NDP starts talking about...
Tell people what a bond is.
Victory bonds. It's like buying a stock in a government.
Yeah.
It's like you're buying stock in Canada and you're betting in the next 10 years, because that's how long the bond is for. You're betting in the next 10 years that we are going to win.
So Canada has, I don't know how many it is, but billions of dollars worth of American bonds.
Yeah.
That we can keep, we can hang on to, we can sell. There's a whole bunch of different things that we can do with them.
And percentage-wise, it's going to be 0.25 higher than the average 5-year bank GIC.
All right. So wait, the Liberals want more bonds, or they want to sell the bonds?
NDP want to sell bonds to Canadians to raise money.
Oh, I like it.
And then, so you're investing back in Canada. When people talk about, we didn't even spend any time talking about the debt. When people talk about our debt or our deficit, and a lot of the times people say, who the hell do we owe? Everybody understands the deficit as being interest on the money we borrowed. That's fine. By the way, nobody's reducing the debt. All governments are trying to do every year is balance the budget, and balancing the budget means having no deficit.
Are any countries deficit free?
No.
In the world?
I don't think so. We can look that up.
Yeah, I'd wonder. Let me call my assistant. Alexa. I'm just kidding. I don't have an Alexa. They're always listening. I can't have that.
a minimal or no debt, some countries. Oh, Saudi Arabia.
Well, that's a lot of oil.
Small economies. Luxembourg.
Luxembourg? For sure. For sure.
You know,
Is
countries
that
like Brunei. Oh, Hong Kong, but Hong Kong's not. Hong Kong was a country up until 1999, but technically they're owned by Britain.
crazy
Kuwait-
rich Asians though, you
Kuwait
know?
doing really well.
Oil.
Low levels of debt. So the debt is the money you owe. The deficit is the interest you're paying on the money you owe. For the most part, every Western democracy is worried about balancing their budget by making sure that they pay off their deficit. Okay, so that's the only thing that they're really interested in, so that the deficit doesn't add money to the debt. So if I owe, forget the big numbers. If I owe $1,000 on my credit card and I'm paying 9% interest, I just want to make sure that 9% is paid all the time.
Right.
So I just keep owing the 100. I never add to the 100 because I missed a minimum payment.
It's like the interest on your mortgage.
Exactly.
You're going to pay $73,000 a year in interest, and a good
Exactly.
$2,200 on your principal.
So when we talk about who the money is owed to, who the debt, everybody's like, and this is where I almost broke an economist brain when I was in university, because they were like, Joanna, why don't you take economics? I'm like, you don't want me to take economics. I don't understand economics. He's like, I can explain it to you, because he liked me and he thought I was good in politics. And so he sat me down for 45 minutes. And after the 45 minutes, he said, please never take an economics class. Because my problem with debt and ratios and how you buy out the debt and who owes who money is the fact that it's all made up.
Yeah.
We have decided on monopoly money. We've decided it is no longer based on the gold standards. It's just based on what we think it's worth. And predominantly now we're saying it's based on military might and stability of your country. And in that world, I don't understand how I have to owe them and you're going to owe me and I'm going to owe them. So a big chunk of the debt would be other countries that have lent you money. That's why China owes so much of U.S. debt. Canada owes so much of U.S. debt. Different countries that have lent you money because it's a smart thing to do, right? You lend them money. It's like they now owe you. In Canada and the United States, it's also to Canadians and Americans who have bought bonds and predominantly who have bought bonds within that market. That's who they owe the money to. So if I buy a 10-year bond, technically what I've just purchased is a part of that debt.
And you're hoping that the strength of their U.S. dollar goes up enough that by the time that 10 years is up, your bond is worth more than what you bought it for.
Well, they're promising it will be, right? So they are securing it. And the only way that doesn't happen for the most part is if a government falls.
If Donald Trump tanks the Dow.
But a lot of people think that Donald Trump is
this is on purpose.
I'm not trying to give him any more credit, but a lot of people are trying to say they're about to renegotiate how much money they owe and how much interest they're going to pay. So if I can devalue,
it's like you're declaring bankruptcy.
If I can devalue my currency, then I can owe less when I play it all out, and then I take all the tariffs away and I watch it all go back up.
For sure.
The mere fact that somebody can do that, and this is why the economics prof agrees with me but doesn't like what I have to say, invalidates the system. It is a bullshit system that doesn't make any sort of logic or sustainable or stable sense other than our belief in something like Santa Claus, because we just say it's true because it's true. And we find all these little loopholes to fraudulently play with it in order for it to benefit us at the end.
Yeah.
I have a problem with it. I have a problem with the way it's always worked. Ever since the dollar's been taken off the gold standard and put onto the stock market like everything else in the 70s, I have a problem with it. I have a problem that everything that we say is a free market enterprise and supply and demand should take over, that whoever is in charge of the supply manipulates the supply in order to change the demand and therefore the price.
Totally.
If De Beers released all of the diamonds,
what a joke.
They'd be worth less than silver.
Listen, if any of you are of the younger demographic and you want to get engaged, please just buy a sapphire. Buy yourself an emerald. Diamonds are, buy yourself a gem that's been made in a lab. It is such a ridiculous system, but it's all made up.
Buy yourself a TFSA.
Yeah, honestly.
And I don't know, tattoo the number on your shoulder as a, it's
buy yourself an American bond. Canadian. Buy a Canadian. First of all, if you take nothing else away from this, please vote.
Vote. That's it.
Just vote.
Just vote.
Even if you feel it's not going to make a difference.
I don't care. Vote.
Just vote.
If I saw 85% voting turnout and they voted for somebody that I didn't necessarily like or think was going to, I would be in awe
Yeah.
of the fact, but that's what democracy did in this moment, so I have to get behind it.
Yeah.
When you have a guy like Donald Trump passing executive order, and changing the
Constitution
infrastructure, the Constitution in the United States, and less than 50% of 25%, like, you understand that the United States, 50% voted, less than half voted for Trump.
For sure, it was like 21% or something. It was like 20 whatever percent.
That is not a
That's
mandate.
why he's in power.
90 million people could have voted for Bernie Sanders as a write-in. Or
they
AOC.
They could have voted for
anybody.
And it would have been better.
But you have to vote.
Yeah.
And even if it's voting on gut instinct,
sure,
that's fine too.
Yes.
I don't care why. I don't care how. I don't care what you're doing on that day. Get your ass up out of the couch.
Yeah.
Whatever job you are doing, and I know there are some people that are like, Joanna, I work 2 jobs. How am I supposed to?
There is early.
Get it?
There are early ballots.
Many different times where you can vote.
Yeah.
Figure it out and get the job done.
For sure, you have to do it.
From a teacher.
And remember, you're voting for a party too. So even if you don't necessarily love Carney or you don't love whatever, what is the party standing for? What are their platforms? What is going to work out best for you and your family in general, you know? And
again, think long term.
Try, please.
Think long term, because if we think short term,
yeah,
and we think about the money that they're going to give us back in the first month or 2 months or 3 months in office,
yeah,
and we don't think long term, and this is true of both parties, right? I said at the beginning, you believe in one of 2 things, and I think it's a valid debate and a valid discussion. You either think that a strong economy is going to bring about a just society, or a just society will eventually bring out a just and stable economy. I don't care which one of those 2 people you are, because I think they both have validity to their arguments. Pick a side, get up, go vote.
Excellent. Joanna Johnson.
This is good. What was that?
What a pleasure. Where can people find you? Where can they find you, Joe?
You can find me on TikTok and Instagram, Unlearn16, also on Blue Sky and Substack.
Are you on Blue Sky?
I am. I'm all over the place. Blue Sky won't let me post as long of a video, so Blue Sky, can we figure that out?
Substack won't let me post as long of a video.
Substack won't either. I need to rant, guys. Come on, pull it together.
It's true.
And my YouTube channel, Unlearn16 class, is in session.
Hey, guys, I came up with that tagline.
She did.
I sure did.
That was her.
Thank you guys for listening to our first guest episode. Please subscribe to the podcast because I'm new and I have no friends. If you enjoyed this and you think other people would benefit from learning about anything we talked about here today or in general, please share it with the people that you know because that really, really helps me. Thank you for listening to Things I Wish I Knew About.
Things I Wish I Knew.
Now you know.
Later we'll discuss Indiana Jones.
Next time. Okay, bye.